and then freezing in the winter. I mean, it's like a haiku. It's a poem to do this. There, you got to see it twice, the iceberg. All the important stuff is below the surface. And I wish I could you turn it around next time, you know, this upside down, because I can say a lot more fun things about it. It was Dave McKay who inverted the iceberg. Is he here today? Well then, honor his genius for doing that. Okay, remember the Industrial Revolution? Yeah, John and I remember it. So, what they did was to raise the productivity that has been going on for 20,000 years from 1% per year to between 2 and 3%, creating fabulous wealth. So, basically, we have now not an industrial revolution coming on, we have a knowledge economy revolution coming on. This is a different animal. 80% of the US economy is now a knowledge economy. And look what it is doing. There's a lot of lamps there. Google went from 0 to 166 billion in 5 years. I mean, this is like the Seafood Institute here. You realize how the enormous specter of achievement using something that doesn't need brick or mortar. They need ideas. And there is an infinity of ideas in the world. And you got to find them and combine them. Here's Microsoft from 0 to 229 billion and never seemed to stop growing. And then think Amazon. Amazon went up the day before we left with 24% in one day. Yahoo, Skype, that's Estonia. How many people do we have from Estonia here?
They were here after you this morning too.
Yeah, well, let me honor them for Skype. And then, what is it? YouTube and Facebook and Apple and Monster. And you think these are fluffy companies, you know, they don't count or don't do anything. Well, give me a break. In every manufacturing setting, you have within that setting at least half is knowledge. I mean, this is what Mr. Mason talked about yesterday. And knowledge is everywhere, and it is that changes things. Here are the stock prices, just to show that I've shown all these dismal stock prices. Now here you have the superstars. Look how low the Dow Jones is below what their actual stock is. This is what we regard as financial productivity. The higher up you are above Dow Jones, the more you dominate the economic landscape. So, the first time I met Peter Drucker, it was in his house in California. I was so intimidated, I felt like wearing a monk's robe walking into this hallowed house. And I was sitting there thinking, what can I say? Well, I didn't have to say it because he said it. The most important challenge of the next century will be to improve the productivity of the knowledge worker. Because that productivity is inside of that person's head. Very hard to captivate. You actually have to ask him. Very hard to measure with stopwatches. Because how long does it take to think of a book like A Tale of Two Cities? And how could you make it faster? Maybe you could. But the important thing would be for Dickens to figure out how to be a knowledge economy worker and make use of that. So I then shared with Peter Drucker what I'd come there for. I had gotten access of something called Systemfrekvensstor. Any Swedes in the audience? All right. This is you see, I can't pronounce it in Swedish. So it is the extensor system. The extensor system was designed to figure out what was in your minds and hearts. And there was a little box. And Peter Drucker got so impressed with the box, that he said it was to the field of management what the invention of the telescope was to the field of astronomy. And I was intimidated. I didn't write a word for 10 years trying to think out that this is too heavy a burden. And there is that thing, a random impulse generator, a code list, and a medium for storing data. And that is a very interesting tool. This is like Jim Wiggins' work yesterday when he presented the predetermined time. Is Jim here now? There you are. And I am going to tell you a little bit about how this might be related, but also somewhat different. On that screen, which people were making holes in the card, remember this was 1973. You have 6 dimensions, and each dimension may have 12 categories. That means that you have captivated 2,538,086 possible categories. That's a lot more than the 1,300 that you showed us yesterday. But it covers the spectrum of human behavior, particularly when you can add dimensions and add categories within the dimensions. What we did was to have people do this for 6 weeks, because after that data stabilized, and we threw away the first 2 weeks when they all were doing long-range planning, knowing that somebody might, discover. So what happened was that I could take John Heap's productivity, such as he has stated that it was. He's the only one who knows, inside of his head, rated it from 1 to 5, and then I could explain John's productivity as a function of his behavior, attitudes, feelings, judgments, an equation. Usually linearity was enough. That equation, John, has R² higher than 0.95. Because you're a complete creature of habit. You will dispute it, obviously, but you are. Then I can take your negative stress, which will eventually kill you if you don't do something about it. Express that as another equation. Then your satisfaction, which is what you live for. We have to come back to maximizing satisfaction, folks. I'm sorry, it's high time. This is a short life. You ought to be happy. And then your life expectancy. That's a set of your habits. And then I could simulate changes in John's life, which simultaneously will raise his productivity, reduce his stress, increase his job satisfaction, and prolong his life. I don't sit and try to coach Jim. This is a very, very bright man. I hand him the data, and his productivity, such as he himself understands it to be, will increase between 15 and 30%. What is the average increase in productivity? 2% per year. The United States has averaged 2% per year for 130 years running. Now let's see what this instrument did. This was the data collection. That was some of the early reports. You don't know this guy who's on this picture, but he was once a young, ambitious, and healthy, non-fat